Unfortunately, we do not know where the mayor is, so I'm the mayor pro tem, so we will begin. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Toussaint. Here. Councilmember Jameson.
Here.
Councilmember Waite.
Here.
Councilmember Zimmerman.
Present.
And the mayor is missing.
Missing in action. Neil, would you lead us in the flag salute, please? To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. City Manager's report.
Just want to notify the public about 3 events that are coming up. This coming weekend, the Grape Stomp will be, the inaugural event will be occurring and closing the section of First Street from Mission to Copenhagen. And then October 20th, Parking Lot 1 will be closed for the Austin Healey Car Show. And then Parking Lot 1 will also be closed on October 27th for the Porsche Car Show. So just some events that are coming up that will affect the public in the downtown. Those are my updates.
Thank you. Public communication. Tracy?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members, staff, and members of the audience. Tracy Farhad, Executive Director of the Solvang Conference and Visitors Bureau, with a little tourism update for you tonight. First, we wanted to officially invite you to that wonderful event that Mr. Vijo just mentioned, the Solvang Stomp, this Saturday, and it is from 2 to 5 p.m. Our VIP tickets sold out. That's when you get the hour earlier notice, but we're going to have 12 vats full of grapes, 4 tons of grapes. I wanted to thank Lucas Llewellyn for helping us arrange that, and our great event planner, Cultivate Events, who's making all the details come to fruition, no pun intended. And we're also excited about the 2 live bands, 30 tasting rooms, including 1 beer stop for those who do want to enjoy that. And to give you a little stats, because we're looking at this on a daily basis now as we're in the home stretch for the last week, we've sold over 340 tickets, where 90% are from the Los Angeles area, so our mission is working. The average age for the ticket holder was 41. It's gotten a little younger this previous week, so apparently the older ticket holders pre-plan a little further out. But we were a little excited about that. So that's coming up. In addition to the Solvang Stomp, tickets are $75 and they're available solvangusa.com/stomp. We're also co-sponsoring with the Santa Barbara Vintners Association the movie Psalm 3. It is a movie premiere that's happening right at the Solvang Festival Theater. It's very exciting for the entire wine industry. If you're followers of the wine in the wine world, Psalm 1 and Psalm 2, they're kind of cult films about the sommeliers. So this is Psalm 3, and there's supposed to be a pretty exciting turn of events in this movie, so we hope you'll come. It's $25 tickets are available at celebrationofharvest.com, or of course, with your Stomp ticket, you get $5 off at our site, solvangusa.com. So come to the Stomp and Psalm, and if you can say both of them by the end of the evening, you're doing really well. So, and this is the poster for that, and we hope you'll have somewhere you can put that up around the City Hall. Also wanted to let you know just about a few visitor center count stats, because it's always interesting to find out how our first quarter has been doing. July stats, we were off. We were actually down by about 300 people. Otherwise, that was pretty good for even July. It's not our top, but it's certainly not our lowest either. But what I was excited to see was both August and September. So we had an increase in both August numbers and in September numbers. And I really believe a large part of that is the fact that Highway 1 opened back up. And I know people saw a stronger end of August into September. I also wanted to let you know about our publicist, Laura Kath, is in San Francisco tonight. She's at the Visit California Media Reception. There are 100 outlets that are registered for that event. It's kind of a mini trade show, and Laura will be promoting everything about Solvang and our top story ideas for those media outlets through that state-sponsored media opportunity. So that's the message. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Taylor?
Hi, good evening. I'd like to speak with you about some speed and traffic calming measures on Viborg Road to increase some of the safety within that neighborhood. I've provided you with a handout that has a proposal about what I'm looking to hopefully have achieved. Just some quick background, I moved to the Viborg Road area about 12 years ago. Speeding and safety along Viborg Road has become rather out of control and dangerous since that time. In particular, over the last 2 years, as people have been using it more and more for alternate routes to bypass downtown. Speeding has increased dramatically. The signs at Alisal, Nysted, and Friedenborg Canyon are often rolled through, or in Alisal's case, often just disregarded. I just heard a council member speak about how they've seen that themselves. I've actually spoken here about this issue 2 years ago on my birthday. It was a fun birthday to come down, but I did it. But I just quickly, since that time and over the past year, we've had pets killed on our road. We've had multiple homes with damages to mailbox, fences, and other property. In June of this year, a woman speeding drove through my entire front yard in broad daylight, destroying 50 feet of my fence line and proceeding through 20 feet of my neighbor's property. As of earlier this week, someone drove through my car, which was legally parked on Viborg, destroying it, of which I will never receive adequate value for replacement. Drivers commonly honk, throw their arms up, and even give us the finger when we're turning into our driveway because we're impeding the flow of traffic to them. We've also been egged in retaliation for trying to wave at drivers to slow down with our daughters when we're either getting the mail, getting out of our car, or crossing the street at Scoggin to go ride bikes. The results are, and today I was getting all of my belongings out of my car so it could be towed to get appraised for a total today. And I had multiple neighbors who've been in our community for over 20 years and 30 years and said they've just given up. They said that they feel unsafe, they feel frustrated, and they feel fatigued. Those were 3 words that were given to me standing in front of my house today. I feel pretty powerless to affect change in my neighborhood. I'm actually exploring selling my home over this, which I actually like quite a bit. But I do not feel safe on this street, and I do not feel that the city has actually paid any real credence to this in any long-term, lasting, sustainable way. So what I'm proposing, and I have a lot of energy that I would love to offer the City Council, and I even have money to offer the City Council should they need it. I've spoken with a few City Council members already who have promoted the idea of reducing the speed limit to 25 and increasing Viborg. Our community is grateful for that offer, and we look forward to its implementation. I have spoken with the Director of Public Works, Matt Vanderlinder, who was very welcoming of my call. I spoke with him, I think, 2 years ago as well, who is supportive of traffic calming measures, in particular curbs and center islands, which would force the slowing of traffic. You can see some examples of that in the back of that handout I gave you. These measures can be done quickly and inexpensively. And I have also offered to run a neighborhood campaign to raise funds for this if it would allow the process to be expedited. I won't go into the specifics of my proposal, but I have various street corners and intersections where I think we could add a few measures. And lastly, I'll just say it really pains me to actually have to come here again. And I've signed multiple petitions over my 12 years on the street with other neighbors, and everyone's just kind of given up. So we're looking for a response from the council and the city, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Taylor. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak in public comment? Okay, then let's move along. Council comments. Neil, would you like to start, please?
Yeah, I just want to say congratulations to SpaceX and that awesome launch yesterday. That was cool, and then the re-entry of landing. That was awesome, and it's looking bright for the future. So I'm excited about that. That's all. Thanks.
Karen?
I would like to suggest that we do some sort of an educational meeting or workshop regarding our general plan and our urban boundaries, so that our council and the next council can better understand exactly what it is that we're dealing with, because this seems to be an issue that is repeatedly coming up in front of us. So I feel that it's something very important that we should address. So I really would like to be able to get into detail regarding that, so we're very clear on it as a council.
Ryan?
So I'd support that.
I think that's just part of the process that we're going to be going through with the
We
general
will,
plan.
on the general plan update, yeah.
Yeah.
So you're talking in advance of that or as part of that process?
As part of the process,
Okay,
I just think
yeah.
it's very important that we really understand this very clearly.
Okay.
Ryan?
Well, I guess, should we do anything about putting this issue about the speed on Viborg
We'll bring it up.
on the advanced calendar?
We need some shaking heads, yes or no?
Yes, I was just under the impression that we weren't to take action on public comment, but
You can get consensus to bring it back.
Right.
yes, I completely agree we should bring that back.
Okay,
Me too.
that's it.
That's it? That's your only comment? Okay. Correspondence? I didn't see any this time.
There is. There's a
There is?
LA Times
Oh, the
letter, and
Danish
Chuck
article.
Stacy. We didn't put that on there, but Chuck
Okay.
Stacy brought that to the council's attention.
Okay. Consent agenda. Does anybody wish to pull any of the items? Okay, I'm looking for a motion for approval.
I'll move that we accept the consent agenda as is.
Is
I
there a
will second that.
Roll call.
Councilmember Toussaint,
Yes.
Councilmember Waite,
Yes.
Councilmember Zimmerman,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Jameson.
Yes. I'm a little concerned. I think we need a,
Eddie is out looking for Jim, so.
okay. Who's looking for Eddie? Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you. Regular agenda, CalPERS presentation, what we've all been waiting for.
We have our actuarial on the conference line. I'm gonna key his mic, but I think Sandra will then start I don't know if you want to introduce him or how you want to do this, but.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, Mayor Pro Tem. Tonight I'm going to talk about our CalPERS pension liability, and on the phone available to us is Bill Karch. He's our actuary with the CalPERS system. So, Bill, I don't know if you want to say a couple words.
I think this is my cue. Good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to talk with you. I'd rather be there in person. I just love your bakeries. Sorry I'm not there.
All right. Well, with that, so tonight we're going to give you the status of our CalPERS pension liabilities and ask for some direction on some possible future cost-saving measures. As you know, the city became a member of CalPERS in 1985, and we have an agreement with CalPERS covering 3 different categories of members. One is our miscellaneous or classic members that were brought into the CalPERS system prior to January 1st, 2013. And 67% of our staff, of 22 out of 35, are classic members right now. And then we have our PEPRA members. Those are employees that were hired on January 1, 2013 or later, part of the Public Employees Pension Reform Act. They get a lesser retirement benefit than other employees, and we have about 37% of our staff, or 11 employees, represent the PEPRA group. Then we also have a contract for the safety. So years ago, the city had 2 active firemen, and once we were annexed into the Santa Barbara County Fire, they were taken out of our plan, but we are still responsible for covering a portion of their retirement costs. So as you know, CalPERS serves as our third-party administrator for CalPERS pension benefits, and they administer the benefits that were negotiated between the city and the employees as part of our contract. I'm going to talk about the different components of that, but I do want to mention this does not cover the OPEB or what's called other post-employment benefits, and those are benefits that retirees who are eligible for particular health and medical benefits. So this doesn't cover that particular liability. That, as of June 30, 2016, which was our last valuation, was about $1.9 million. We have to get a valuation every 2 years, and that valuation is being currently worked on. We're getting some information from CalPERS for that. It goes to our other actuary who works that out, and we should have that, I'm hoping, by the end of the month, and then I can come back and do a separate report, which has been requested on OPEB. So as part of our pension cost, we have three components. We have what's called the normal cost, which is like the premium or the ongoing annual cost for providing benefits to the retirees. There is an employee share portion of the retirement cost. And just to explain a little bit, so the city negotiated years ago, the city currently pays the 8% employee cost. But out of the normal cost, the city employees are paying 8% of that particular cost. So it's somewhat of a wash, but just so you're clear that we are paying the city's employees' cost, they are cost sharing our normal cost. And I'll go over that with the spreadsheet a little bit later. And then there's our unfunded liability. So when we look at the difference between the funds that are needed to pay all of the retirement benefits and the market value of the assets in the pool that's managed by CalPERS, that difference there represents our unfunded liability. Years ago, many pensions were what they call overfunded. So in a sense, they had more money in the pool, they had plenty of money to pay out all the retirement benefits. And you might have seen some cities at that point in time negotiating better contracts for their employees. So where you might have a city giving their employees 2% at 55, when things were great, pensions were doing good, investments were returning great amounts, they negotiated to give their employees 2.5 at 55. So, and that 2.5 or 2%, when you hear that, that means that's 2.5% of their salary for every year that they worked. And that total becomes their retirement pension benefit. On a side note, the PEPRA members get 2% at 62, so it's quite a bit different than the classic employees at the city. So CalPERS puts together valuation reports. I've included those in your packet, one for the miscellaneous plan, one for the safety plan, and one for the PEPRA plan. And they're also available publicly on the website, so anybody can go out and take a look at those. And in that report, it contains a bunch of information about the status of our plans. Overall, CalPERS has improved their funding level of the retirement pool from 68 to 71% at the end of June 3018. So they're on an upswing, which is great. But they continue to make different actuarial assumptions which affect our bottom line. And a couple of those that they've made, when they're doing their projections, they might say, well, we think our investment portfolio is going to return 8%. And for a long time it was 8%. But they have slowly moved the needle lower because of changes in the market and to try and manage some of the volatility and the swings. If you look at some of their returns in years, it could be as high as 21%, 1 year is 0.6%. So to help manage that volatility, and Bill can talk about that a little bit later, they have changed that assumption to be, it was 7.5%, and now they're moving it to 7 over the course of 3 years, and we're in year 2. So with that, what that means is the expected amount of money that they're going to earn on their portfolio is less. So somebody's got to make up that difference, and that comes back to the employers and then ultimately potentially the employees. Another change in the assumption that goes into forming how much our unfunded liability is the amortization rate. So every year, if there's a gain or a loss, CalPERS was amortizing that over a 30-year period. They have now shortened that amortization period to 20 years. So that also has an impact on our unfunded liability, and we'll continue to see that, I think, going forward. They do include in the valuation reports also a discount rate sensitivity table that gives you an idea when you look at that table of how big an impact 1% or 2% can make in their projected earnings. So for example, if our discount rate was 6% instead of the current 7.5, our miscellaneous unfunded liability would go from $3.7 million to $6.5 million, and our funding status would go down to 63.9%. So that's a huge swing, whereas if the projected rate was 8%, our unfunded liability would go down to 2.3%, and a funded status would be 83%. So this is just an example to give you an idea of how we're sort of at the whim of the market. We can do all the planning we want and try to, save and pay things off, but every year it's like a new refinance of a mortgage in a sense, where they amortize those gains or losses over a 30-year period now to be 20, and it adds on to our basis of unfunded liability. So I'll talk a little bit more about that too. I've identified the funding status of each of our plans in attachment E. I'm going to bring that up on the screen. Okay, now I can't see this direction, so bear with me. Okay, so right here, this is showing what our unfunded liability was in June 30, 2016 of all the plans, about $3.8 million. Then we have, as of June 30, it went to $3.838 million, and now we're looking at June 30, 19, about $3.9 million. So you can see that we had a couple good things happen. We had the safety plan. It kind of goes down and then it's going back up. It decreased about $886 there. And then the PEPRA unfunded liability, we paid off the current amount of the unfunded liability on the on the safety plan. That's not the same as paying off the plan, which I'll discuss a little bit later, but we did pay off that unfunded liability. So you can see it's zero here. And then the miscellaneous plan has gone up slightly to about $3.8 million. That's where we projected to be at the end of June 30, 2018. So our overall, it increased almost $100,000, primarily in the miscellaneous plan. And then the unfunded liability is about $3.9 million now. So what do we do about this? You can see also on, let me show you the next one here. On this particular chart, what I've tried to show you here is the different components of the costs. So here, you'll see the miscellaneous. So CalPERS does a projection based on a certain amount of payroll growth, and that number is 2.75% a year. So I'm just going to give you what CalPERS projects, although we know that it may be slightly different because as people are leaving, we're bringing in more PEPRA members. It tends to be more PEPRA. And we don't typically grow or add many new positions in a year, so I would project our growth to be slightly smaller. But for the purposes of being consistent with the CalPERS report, I've used 2.75%. So you can see here is our total normal cost. This also comes from CalPERS. It's 11.419% for fiscal year 18-19. But as I mentioned, the employees are cost sharing that, so you take out 8%, and we're left paying 3.19% of our payroll. So our annual cost, kind of that annual premium, is $73,000. We are paying, as I mentioned, the city employee share. That's 8%, so that's $170,000. And then we're paying another $213,000 for our unfunded liability for 18-19, for a total cost for just the miscellaneous plan of $457,000. On the PEPRA side, it works a little bit different. There is just the normal cost for the employees. There's no cost sharing. Employees are already paying their 6.5%. The intent of PEPRA was to get them to pay almost half or half of the normal cost. So our portion of that is 7.266% and represents about $22,000. As I mentioned, our unfunded liability that we paid off this year was the $12,764. And then you have the safety. There is no normal cost, but our unfunded liability payment is $9,800 a year, projected to grow to about $11,000 by 24-25. The bottom line, and which everybody I know is concerned about, is where's this going? And so our annual cost right now, about $500,000, and we anticipate by 24-25 that it's going to go to $756,000. We have the funds. I wouldn't say, as many people, that this is a pension crisis, but I do think there are some things that we can do to help mitigate some of these ongoing costs. The general fund has a very healthy reserve, and it's also growing every year. We anticipate about $800,000 going into the general fund for 6/30/18. We're wrapping up that audit. So we can make these payments, but the problem is, the market and the changes in assumptions by CalPERS. We can pay off the UAL this year like we did on the PEPRA plan, but next year it could be back because if they do not do well in the market or because of the change in assumption going to 7%, then we will most likely have a UAL, maybe not in 1920, but maybe in 2021. So that's where some of that market volatility comes into play, and where it's very hard to somewhat plan prospectively what to do with these annual payments that we need to make. But there are a few options which I'll go over and are listed in my report. One of the things we could do is pay off the safety plan unfunded liability. So that's the $58,000. That's just the unfunded liability. But the other option would be, that I talk about in there, is to actually terminate the contract. So this has come up before with questions about, well, why can't we just get out of CalPERS? And you can get out of CalPERS, however, it's about a 1-year process, and what they do is tell you how much value of money you need to pay to them so that they can turn around, invest it in a very low risk vehicle, so that the monies are there to pay your retirees the benefits you've promised. So, for example, on the safety plan, that's could be about $500,000. We would pay that off. We have no more liability, no more unfunded liability every year, and we're done with that contract. That money is then taken and put aside so that those retirees will get the benefits they've earned, but we are no longer a part of that process anymore, and we're done in a sense. No more gains, losses, nothing to worry about. You could do that also on the miscellaneous plan, but the value to do that is between $15 and $20 million, much higher, because of, again, they have to take the money that you give them and then they turn around and invest it in very low risk, but they need enough money to assure that the people who've earned those benefits are going to get them. So similar situation, you could do that. I'm not recommending that at this point in time, but that's certainly an option that the council could pursue. But that would come with its own unique set of issues. We do prepay the unfunded liability each year. So CalPERS gives you the option to spread it out over 12 months, or you can prepay. And so we do, and we save about 3.5%. So I think going forward, we continue to do that. That hasn't been an issue in the past. Another option, although it won't be popular, would be to work with the local bargaining unit and try to negotiate an additional 2% cost share. So the employees would start paying 2% of their own contribution for a total of 10%, the 8% employee normal cost and 2% of their own cost sharing. So I've estimated that could save the city about $245,000 over the next several years. If they were to negotiate, up to the 2%. So that's an option that could be presented. I talked about terminating the safety and the miscellaneous contracts. Another option that CalPERS presents in the valuation plan is they give you sort of a payment schedule, much like a home loan where you could refinance your house down from 30 years down to 20. We could continue to reduce that and maybe say we're going to do a 15-year payment schedule. We wouldn't have to necessarily commit to that in case the city were to have an economic difficult year, but we could continue to pay like we were on a 15-year plan. So we could pay more money every year, try to pay off some of those lost bases, and then try to gain some ground by paying off the oldest debt first, in a sense. So that would be another option. The city could also put some money into a trust. So just like we've done with OPEB, we've put money aside in a trust to earn additional interest and have that money there so that when it kind of gets to a certain point, we'll be able to just take the money from that trust and pay our annual costs for retiree benefits. So we could do a similar thing with CalPERS. We could take some money, put it away into a trust, and have it be managed by someone else, but you're still at the risk of the market. So that trust could earn 5%, it could earn 10%, or none. And then it would basically be like a rainy day fund for in the event the city needed funds to help make those payments. So that's also an option. And then the other one would be, again, to utilize reserves or through the budgeting process, designate money every year if we have a surplus to go towards paying off these older lost bases, and again, start chipping away at some of the debt. I think that would be the most effective process that we could do in terms of trying to really reduce the unfunded liability short of terminating the contract. So with that, again, some of the recommendations that I've put in the report are we could continue to prepay, which I think is a good choice and one that we wouldn't have any difficulty doing. Meet and confer with the local bargaining unit to discuss contributing an additional 2%. And then also this idea of designating any portion of an increase in the general water and wastewater funds at the end of the fiscal year towards paying down some of these additional older loss bases of the unfunded liability. And again, start chipping away at some of that older debt. So with that, you could approve any of the options or none of the options, or deliberate some more. The impact to the city will be, of course, utilizing whatever reserves would be needed to make some of those payments, whether you wanted to do a termination of the safety plan or just continue to pay the UAL every year, or designate some of the reserves each year or a percentage of any surplus we might have towards paying off some of that older debt. And with that, I'm available for questions, and Bill is also available for questions.
Does he have any other comments?
Bill, the mayor asked if you had any other comments.
No, that was very succinct. Thank you, Sandra. I would recommend that, just to slowly chip away if you can. I don't want your financial situation. And the cost sharing, too. I believe there's the majority of the plants, I don't have the statistics, but are moving away from employers paying for the employee share. So that's would be one step that would alleviate the costs that you're incurring right now.
Okay. Are there any questions from council at this time?
So one of the questions I had was on your sheet here that I think your computer went to sleep. Do we have any way of basically stress testing what would happen with our payments if we experienced another recession like we did in 2008 today? What would happen to our unfunded liability? And I believe in looking through the CalPERS reports, I think we were about 100% funded in 2008, and then in 2009, after the recession, we're about 50% funded. Today, by pumping more cash into the system and the market recovering, we're still only at about 70% funded, and that's even questionable given the discount rate that's used, because as we know, as that backs in, and CalPERS already agreed that they're going to be moving that down, that the unfunded liability jumps up significantly with that. And I think you said about 63% earlier. So with that, I see nothing getting us to 100% funded very quickly. But if we were to have another 2008 recession, for example, tomorrow, basically the way I interpret that is now we'd be at less than 35% funded. And then what's that going to do to our cash flows? Because we'd also have a situation where our structural cost for the city is much higher today than what it was 10 years ago.
Well, I'll try to answer that, but yes, you are correct. It's a direct, we assume 7% a year, basically. That's what our liabilities, we discount at 7%. So you could say that they also grow at 7%, all things being equal. So if you do lose, like we did, minus 24% and another minus 6, so we lost minus 30 in those 2 years from 08 and 09. And yes, so that dropped this. So add those two together, that's minus 30. But we assumed 7. Well, back then it was 7 3/4, I believe, for another 2 years. So that's another 15%. So 15 plus the 30, you're off by minus 45%. So yeah, you were at 100% funded, and bang, you're down to 100 minus 45. So you're absolutely right. It's a direct impact. What would happen for the payments? Yes, you would get for this last year, if it happened tomorrow, you would get a 30-year amortization with a ramp. We'd smooth in. payments would increase greatly.
Significantly.
All these defined benefits are all driven by the discount rate, how your investment earnings do, and I can't say it more than that. It's how they go is how the defined benefit plans work. It's just the main driver. We do our own experience studies in terms of when people retire, what their pay increases are, how they disable when they die, and all those stats are very close. We fluctuate within 1 or 2%. If you check our last experience study, you can see those sort of stats that it's a minimal impact. But on the investment side, that's the variable. That is the thing that's out of control. It's either, and we're not seeing those great gains like we did in the 90s. If you look back at the rate of return from CalPERS in the 90s, when Treasury rates were up in the double digits, you saw double-digit returns for, I think, 6 or 7 years out of the 10 out of the 90s. And we're just not seeing that anymore. And if you look at the investment experts, we're not going to see that anymore either. So my concern is just as yours are, is what does the future hold? And that's why I say just go slow on the payments, because I think there's, we're not going to get great gains. It just doesn't look like that. I've been wrong before. The markets always, this country always seems to have a comeback, but it's always safe to be conservative. So I can't really tell you in terms of numerics what your payment schedule would be going forward. If it's some, I can calculate that if you like, but I don't have it in front of me now. But I can guarantee you're going to be seeing a good doubling of your, what we say. We've got on page 14 of your miscellaneous plan, we have projected employer contributions for the next 4 years under low investment scenarios, like 1% per year on average. And you can see your rate jumping up to the payment going up to $400 and almost $500,000 in 23, 24. So that's a quick snapshot on page 14 to give you some idea. It's a sort of a stress test, as you asked, but that's the best I can do at this time.
And then the other question I had for you was, I believe when I was reading the Wall Street Journal, they were suggesting that pension actuaries were suggesting a 6% return rate. So why is CalPERS only lowering down to a 7%?
Well, they had a ALM study, and that's what that was the product of it, was recommending to go from 7.5 to 7. They're going to do it again in another couple of years, and from that we'll see where it takes them. But they get all the investment professionals that work at CalPERS as well as consultants, and through that they determines 7% would work for our portfolio. With the private equity and hedge funds, they've got bonds, global equity, real estate, and all those combined using, expectations of the future, what they expect the markets to provide. I'm just the actuary. I concentrate more on the liability side, but on the investment side, they came and determined that it was 7%. In 2 years, that may change. So that's my best answer that I can give you.
And then I believe earlier in the year, CalPERS was making, and I think it talked a little bit about it in this presentation here, that kind of changed the equity exposure ratios, basically exposing the portfolio more to take advantage of gains in today's market. Can you explain?
Could you say that again? I'm not.
So what I'm reading is that let's see, I have to find the page.
So you're asking about kind of the investment portfolio moving more towards private equity or different mix of assets to make better returns.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't know where that is. That's on the investment side. What they're always in discussions, and I until they say, and the board, the investment committee decides that yes, you know, who knows what that investment committee, their makeup is, and they decide that they want to go more aggressive. That may very well be the case. But I can't specifically answer to that as to whether they will or they won't.
Okay. I thought that they made changes into more higher risk type portfolios. But I guess my concern was with that was if we're kind of in a high market now and they are now investing in higher risk stocks, then if we do have another recession, then I would expect our investment portfolio to take even bigger of a hit, essentially.
Yes, I think very similarly to you. I think, you know, you don't want to put down to the pedal to the metal too aggressively. Mm-hmm. And I think the markets too, but all the readings I understand with all the buybacks, the share buybacks, you know, squeezing that earnings expectations going forward, making them look really good, may not be as good as it looks. But that's just my personal opinion. I know maybe you feel that way also, but it's a process. CalPERS is big, and it's a process. So again, if they go deeper into private equity, then I would expect that private equity to do their job and get higher returns, but that's not a guarantee. What as 2008 showed.
So with that, would you agree that if we're in a high market right now and we pumped a bunch of cash into CalPERS and then we had a recession, that basically we're just going to get less with our dollars today?
Well, yeah. If you put in more money now and the market falls, that's a direct loss.
Right. So that's why you're more recommending just making the minimum payments today. I don't know what your city's situation is, but it's, you know, if you look at the amortized schedules we present, the more you put in, the more you save in interest cost. Now, whether the market goes up or down, that's, you know, I can't pass judgment on that. But a loss is a loss. But if you put in more now and the market goes up, then it follows that you would save more money. Got it.
It really depends on your situation and what your, what your ability to pay is. You are controlling your purse strings there, so you have a better idea of you get it. It sounds like you have a good understanding of what's going on, what drives the cost for these plans, and I think knowing your world, what Solvang situation is, you're the best judge of the path forward.
That's it for me now.
Okay. Neil, do you have questions? Karen?
I have no questions at this time. I think it's a pretty comprehensive report, and I just want to make a comment that I do like G regarding the city could pre-fund the retirement costs in a trust similar to the city's trust for other post-employment benefits. I do like that. I understand market risk quite well. I like the idea of continuing to prepay the UAL amounts. I also like the idea of conferring with local bargaining units to discuss employees contributing 2% more towards the employee share. So I'm not sure we're in a position at this point to make an absolute decision. There are a lot of options. Thank you.
To offer my excuses for being late. It was a family emergency. I was in the ER for a while today. I'm fine, so I'll take over from here. But continue, please.
Okay, we have had the presentation on CalPERS.
Yes.
Okay, and we've just gone around and had some council comments. There have been no public comments yet.
No public. We're at public comment time. Well, then let's. Since I missed the questions, I'll just assume that they've asked mine. Okay, let's go to the public for comment. You don't have any questions on this? No, not right now. There's no public. There's no speaker slip for the public comment. Does anybody in the public wish to comment at this time? Chris, please come up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, City Council. And again, this is a tough topic, and I appreciate the fact that you're taking this up and helping us, the voters, to understand it in greater detail. There's no easy answers, no easy solutions, but I do have some questions, and hopefully you guys will take some time to explain that to us as well. My understanding is, oh, by the way, I'm Chris Dearness, resident of Solvang. My understanding is that CalPERS, or Solvang's on the hook for CalPERS losses. So we could be 100% funded as we were back in 2008 and 9. And if CalPERS loses money, we have to make up the difference, no matter how many times it happens. I would call that a moral hazard. Basically, you know, we hope the CalPERS does a great job, but if they don't, we're on the hook as voters and taxpayers. So the question in my mind is, how do we put a floor in terms of Solvang so that we're no longer on the hook for these losses? A typical annuity contract has some type of a guaranteed floor of 2 to 3%, meaning you can never lose. You'll always get 2 to 3%, but your upside is capped at, say, 8 or 10%. That seems like a much stronger contract, investment contract. Why can't CalPERS offer something like that? And if they won't offer it, why can't we buy some kind of a contract like that? So we basically create our own floor. No matter how many times CalPERS loses money, we're protected because that insurance contract pays us back. This is basically a put on the index, for example. The second question I have has to do with OPEB. Unfortunately, this is a mess too. And I'm not saying that it's mismanaged, it's just the way it goes. According to an article in the LA Times, February of this year, they were explaining that the OPEB cost to CalPERS jumped from $77 billion to $91 billion in just 1 year. That's an increase of more than 18%. And the reason wasn't bad investment. It was because the cost of offering the medical benefits had risen 18% in 1 year. Now, nobody knows whether if it's going to continue to rise at that rate. We hope it doesn't. But how do we protect ourselves against rising medical costs? Again, I don't know how Solvang fixes this other than to get out of this, because you can't grow the investment fast enough to keep up with the rate of inflation in healthcare costs. Anyway, I look forward to your comments, and thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Does anyone else wish to comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council for discussion.
I have a comment, or to respond to Chris. The tragedy of the situation is CalPERS is a scam, and there's no skin in the game on their side. They can make as many mistakes as they want, and there's no responsibility on their end. They're fully backed out by taxpayer money, and it's a joke. So until we come up with a system where those people are held liable for mismanaging public money, there's no way to solve the problem. And yeah, they're basically just the suckers at the table. They're buying the garbage that Wall Street's selling them, and yeah, they're falling for it. So they need better people in there working with skin in the game that holds them liable.
Any other comments?
Yes. So, you know, we do have the option of getting out of this, and we have to understand the ramifications of that, how costly they would be, and how that could be a real deterrent into hiring qualified individuals to work for the city, because that would put your pension and your retirement at risk. I think I'd like to get a better understanding of what type of investments are permitted within CalPERS, because a member of our audience, Chris, brought up a very legitimate point, and having worked with other public entities, there are restrictions on what you can and cannot invest in with public funds. It would be very nice if you could, I know he was talking about, you know, making a put, but I would call it more of a hedging your investment, where you would be protecting your downside, but you would pay the price for not gaining on the upside of that. So I'm not sure if CalPERS allows any type of an annuity. There are annuities that do have those options within them, so I'd be curious to know.
Just one comment. I can't speak to what their current asset allocation is. There's a handout in the packet, and 50% is global equity, 28% is fixed income, 13% is real assets, 8% is private equity, and 1% is liquidity. And so that kind of gives you what their portfolio looks like right now. At the CalPERS conferences, I've heard them, at the investment officers, talk about some of the difficulties they have. At one point in time, you know, to be social conscious, thank you, investing, you know, they're not investing in tobacco stocks and smoking stocks and things like that. So they have to balance the loss of expected returns in some of those markets that have grown versus being socially responsible and investing in things that their membership wants. So that is some of the struggle that they've had. And I know they look at, you know, this return rate, but they can't just drop it to 6 because you could see the spike that it would have in the cities and their ability to pay. I feel that if we had a recession and we dropped 45, 50%, it would have huge ramifications for not just us, but all cities. And I think CalPERS would have to work together with the cities to figure out a solution. The cities are not going to be able to afford triple, quadruple payments on something like that should that type of event happen. That's just my feeling based on what I'm seeing. I also think CalPERS probably has some kind of tipping point where they're at 71% funded now, but if they drop below 50% or something, they're going to have to come to the table and say, cities, this is what's happening. We got to come up with a better working plan and solution. But hopefully they're working on that now so that we don't wait to get to that point. I don't know, Bill, if you can comment on that, but that would be my concern.
No, that's, you've said it. It's, you know, we're at a point, you know, Governor Brown brought in pension reform specifically after that crisis. Well, it took a few years, but, you know, I guess Schwarzenegger was there, but when Brown came in, he put down the PEPRA, the 2% at 62. So maybe something it would, you know, I would expect something like that to happen. If there's another drawdown, as there was in 2008 and 2009, I would expect a political. It would be gained. I would expect something to come from it.
Yeah. The other thing for the city that I can say too is we are hiring more of the PEPRA members. So with the less benefit, that does lower our costs. We're already over a third of our staff for the PEPRA membership. So even though we're paying benefits on the older retired classic members, that does help us slowly reduce our costs going forward.
Are there any other comments? Joni, Ryan?
Ryan asked quite a few.
Can I ask about the California rule, what effect that's going to have on us if that ever comes through?
Bill?
What are you asking, the California rule? Again, it's. I think there's some court cases happening now. I don't know where that will fall, but it's I guess it still stands as it is.
Will that have a positive or negative impact on the city of Solvang if the California rule is abolished?
That would depend on the city of Solvang, what they would like to do, I would think.
The California rule says vesting can be adjusted, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
The most recent rulings have been in favor of, let's call it the city's desired position on that. But everything is subject to both political whims in the future and meet and confer in the present. But the short answer, for those who, I didn't even know what you meant by California rule. I had to have Brad tell me what it is. And basically there's
Put your mic on.
No, my mic is on. Oh. Basically there's a legal argument that everybody who's in the PERS system is vested, and therefore their benefits cannot be affected in any way. No law can change that. No city can do it. The state can't do it. That's a legal argument. Right. But the most recent rulings have been in favor of states and cities in this regard. Those have come down in terms of already retired people, but the legal and constitutional argument is basically the same. So right now, the rules in our favor, that doesn't mean things stay the same.
Are we to pick one of these choices, or these are just for reference now?
It's just on for discussion, so you could give us direction on things to explore, but it's not on for a decision as to any particular direction tonight.
Does anybody have a feeling about any of these options that were suggested?
My concern is I essentially see a report and recommendations here that are given by CalPERS, and I personally feel that's a little bit of a potential conflict of interest. So before making decisions, just following whatever CalPERS recommends to us, and considering the heavy impacts it has on the city's cash flow and our liabilities, personally, I would like to consider issuing an RFI to buy out of CalPERS, because I think this would help educate the council further and bring transparency to the public with regard to this type of issue here, and then help guide us in our decision making.
Just a couple comments. So these recommendations did not come from CalPERS. I mean, these solutions have been discussed with them as possible options, but these are suggestions that I'm making that as possible reductions in our liability. So they're not necessarily recommended or endorsed necessarily by CalPERS. I mean, I think you heard Bill say that, yeah, that is probably one of the better solutions, is to pay off some of this older debt first, which is going towards the older loss base of the amortization schedule. But those are purely really my suggestions that are strategies for helping to pay down the debt. The other option, I understand you want to do an RFI, but CalPERS has a process for terminating the contract. So by doing that, we give them a year notice. The city council would do a resolution. We give them a year notice. They tell us that payoff amount, and then at the end of that 1 year, my understanding is we make that payment. And then our contract is severed, and we would have no more obligation for those benefits. So are you thinking of like pension obligation bonds where we'd go out and get bonds? I guess I'm not sure where that's coming.
I'd just like to hear from another professional entity recommendations and options for it. An RFI doesn't mean that we're pursuing anything. It just simply means that we're engaging those discussions and allowing for that kind of information to be fed to us. So I wouldn't want to prejudge what any of those are. But I think that going through some kind of process like that could, bring other options to the table that perhaps we haven't even considered here.
Okay.
Well,
I don't think there's anything wrong with doing RFI with CalPERS. That's not saying that we are terminating. It's just saying we're investigating, right?
Request for information, RFI.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that was one of our options in here.
I don't remember seeing that one, but
Terminating was one of our.
but I'm not talking about terminating.
So you're looking at an alternative plan for retirement, is in lieu of CalPERS.
That would be
That's
essentially
a request for proposal to do something other than CalPERS.
Right.
Is that what you, okay.
right.
Okay, just so I understand. Are you looking at, if we did not have CalPERS, we'd be offering some kind of 457 plan? So you want to see those kind of options? Or are you looking at options to pay down the liability or get rid of the liability or terminate it?
Actually leaving the system.
Okay, so terminating the contract.
Right.
What are our options for doing that?
Right.
Okay.
Because if we engage entities that can't, they can take that on. They can take on the current asset value we have vested, et cetera, run everything, and give us different options for actually leaving the system. And with that would come even potential cash flow analysis, et cetera. So if we want to, this right here is like all over the map. We have another recession tomorrow. This thing balloons back up again. We have absolutely no control over what we are going to be spending or what's going to be leaving our budget in the years to come. So pursuing some kind of RFI like that would help bring more clarity to that. And at least if we decide just to stay in the system and just keep running the system, we at least know why we decided to do that. But I think if we don't do that, it's just like putting our heads down the sand and just ignoring the writing on the wall here.
Okay.
I gotta agree with that. It would be to our benefit to have this other opinion. I think that'd be great. Or analysis, not opinion.
And as an employee, I think I'd be concerned about it as well, because just like what you were saying earlier, you think CalPERS will come to the table, or, you know, yeah, of course, we've all pretty much know that even as it stands right now, almost every city, you know, in the state of California is going to be going bankrupt if something isn't done here. As an employee, and if my retirement was sitting there, I would be a little concerned about what's going to happen to my benefits tomorrow. And a council mismanaging that is going to basically determine what I'm then left with. And do I lose 50% of my retirement? What is it? So an RFI can bring all those things to light, and perhaps even better cash flow management, et cetera.
So I think what I'm hearing is you'd like us to bring back, I think we'll bring a draft request for proposals out so we know what we're looking for.
Right.
And then before we would send it out to find someone.
Right.
Right. Is that?
So it'd be like an RFI, or you're suggesting
Well,
RFP?
it'd be really more, I think, a RFP. I mean,
Okay.
you're looking for someone to give you a proposal on, you know, how could we get out of CalPERS and continue on, right?
Okay.
I think that's what I'm hearing. But I think what we want to do is bring you something so that we think we know,
Yeah.
before we go any further, we know.
I mean, I want to hear from several
Yeah,
entities
yeah,
what
yeah.
their proposals are,
Right.
and learn from them.
Right. And so we'll do a little more research and try to bring back a proposal for an option to get out. Not saying we're getting out, but
Right.
an option to get out. And if I got
An option to get out, or other options available to consider?
well,
It's all open season, essentially.
I'm sorry?
It would all be open season, essentially, because you're out there asking for RFPs, you know, for solutions basically geared around leaving the system.
Yeah, I would not suggest we limit it to just getting out of the.
Oh,
getting
yeah, I
out
mean,
of
the more
CalPERS.
open it is, the more information we get,
Right,
you know.
yeah.
looking at the Administrative Services Director, do you have enough information?
Yes.
Okay.
I think I understand what you're looking for. I mean, you're basically wanting to hear other options for either paying down the liabilities and moving forward or terminating the contract. Kind of what is our scenarios?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other?
Are we through with Bill?
Sorry?
Are we through with Bill?
Not forever, I hope.
I guess,
Thanks, Bill.
thanks a lot.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. On to item 6.
Item 6, proposed changes to Title 6, Chapter 4, Tobacco Ordinance of the Solvang Municipal Code.
Staff report?
At your August 27th City Council meeting, staff provided some possible changes for the tobacco ordinance to the council, and direction was given. At that point, I did present 5 areas of the, 7 areas where 5 of those would make us have a comprehensive plan. And so, based on that discussion, those 7 are in the staff report, but the council gave some direction on 5 of those, and I will read those off, what I tried to attempt to put into a potential modification to your tobacco ordinance. So 1 would be recreational areas. This would be smoking would be prohibited. In number 1 would be recreational areas, including parks, picnic areas, playgrounds, sports fields, walking paths, gardens, hiking trails, bike paths, riding trails, and skateboard parks. 2 would be service areas, which is including any publicly or privately owned area and streets and sidewalks designed to be used regularly, used by 1 or more persons to receive a service, wait to receive a service, or to make a transaction, whether or not such service or transaction includes exchange of money. The term service area would include, but is not limited to adjacent information kiosks, ATMs, ticket lines, bus stops or shelters, mobile vendor lines, or cab stands. Parking lots would not be included. 3 was dining areas, including any area, street, or sidewalk that is available to or customarily used by the general public or an employee and that is designated, established, or regularly used for consuming food or drink. 4 would be sidewalks within the tourist-related commercial business zone. 5 would be other places when used for a public event, including farmers market, parade, craft fair, festivals, or any other special event open to the general public. Now, because we did have a speaker, Tracy Farhad did represent the SCVB at the last meeting. They did discuss this at their last SCVB board meeting, and there was a request there was 5 different areas they would like to have had included. 1 was all parking lots, 2 was alleys, 3 were bars outside, 4 was outside of public bathrooms, and 5 was hotel parking lots. With the proposed changes, most of those would be covered. And particularly with a public restroom, it'd be 20 feet because that's the distance that was included in the new ordinance. The one location that would not be met would be the bar outside, because most of the bars in Solvang have outside seating areas are for dining and drinking, so smoking would be prohibited under the proposed ordinance that you have before you. So what I tried to do is put this into an ordinance form. We didn't bring it back as a first reading because I wanted to make sure we got the language and direction that you had given. And so what we would do is after tonight, presuming you've come to a final conclusion, we'll bring this back at the next meeting for its first reading. And then once again, as I mentioned last time, typically smoking ordinances are designed to be self-enforcing. So with any change, the city would want to have a pretty robust education campaign to make the public aware of locations where smoking is prohibited. And a good implementation plan can include several different elements, including signage, publications, websites. The city council would need to decide how much of those you would want to include in our future ordinance if we do that, enforcing that. So the county has made me aware that there is some available funding for signage and window stickers and things like that if we do move forward with this. And I think we may have a representative from the county come up during public comment and mention that. But so what I think I tried to do is capture what you gave me and you also use the state's model ordinance on tobacco control and put those in together to give you what is a comprehensive smoking ordinance. So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Any questions of staff report?
Yeah. So if I picked up smoking tomorrow morning, where would I smoke my cigarette?
It's essentially going to be streets and parking lots,
So in the middle of the street, I could light up.
if you don't get hit.
Okay. Okay. Just wondering.
Any other questions of this staff report?
So if we did adopt it as is, and you're essentially limited to streets and parking lots, what are we doing for disposal of butts?
Yeah, that's going to have to be in your implementation plan. You're going to want to put those. There's some ordinances that don't want you to have them near the no smoking areas because then essentially someone's smoking and putting it out right there. So you would have to give us some. That's going to be a funding mechanism as the council moves forward as to where and how many you'd like to do for ashtrays or whatever those types of things. So that isn't included in the ordinance. That's going to be a funding mechanism through the city.
Okay.
And then how does that work? It's enforced by the businesses or just people in the general area at the time?
Right. It's sort of, yeah.
Or social pressure, right?
Or social pressure.
Social pressure.
Right. You see the signs, people kind of, yeah, I don't, unless you direct us to have a staff that just goes around town enforcing it, it's going to be more of a social pressure type thing.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, we'll go to the public for comment. Have a few speaker slips. Linda McClendon, followed by Don Dunn.
Mayor, City Council, and staff. I'm Linda McClendon. I'm a citizen and, of course, resident of Solvang. And I know I don't have to tell you that cancer is the leading cause of death in the United States, and lung cancer is the leading cause of death of cancers. And smoking is the leading cause of those cancers, those lung cancers. So I thank you for what you're doing to help your citizens and to help your visitors here be more healthy and to help us not be part of those statistics. It will be nice not to have to walk through a cloud of smoke walking downtown and scuffing up the cigarette butts. I moved here actually, one of the reasons, because of the clear air. And we don't have a major airport, so we don't have the takeoff and landing and all the fumes and stuff coming off the airplanes, and we're not even in a flight path of major airplanes, so we don't have that. We don't have industries that have smokestacks and put all the junk in the air, and we're not near a really busy major highway, although Mission Drive is getting pretty busy, but we don't have the auto exhaust. So there's a lot of good things about our air, and if we can keep it cleaner by not smoking, that's great. And you're all doing a great job that way. I appreciate it. I'm happy with the proposal that you have, and you know, your life depends on the air you breathe. So your quality of life depends on the quality of air you breathe. And I think everyone who lives here and everyone who visits here will be very happy to know that we have a good quality of air. Thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you. Dawn Dunn? Followed by, go ahead.
No, that's fine.
I'll wait.
Dawn Dunn, Tobacco Prevention Program at the Public Health Department of the county. And good evening, Mayor and council people. I just wanted to let you know specifically we can provide up to $2,500. That would buy you about 250 window decals, which are generally what we use in the business corridors, and about 50 or so metal signs with about $450 left over for public education or some sort of campaign. Or you could do it the reverse. What we can't pay for is ash cans, because we don't, that's just, that infrastructure wouldn't be coming out of our budget. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is the way that you have this written. I believe that your your non-commercial areas, your sidewalks, everywhere except in the business corridor would also allow for smoking, from what I read. That was just another place, so you wouldn't have to be in the median of the public street. And any other questions about where state law allows or anything like that, I'm in the audience. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mary Ellen Reese, thank you for the pronunciation. You know my faults.
I'll blame my husband for that. There's a H in the middle of it that makes no sense at all. That's confusing. So, and since he's not here too, I'll speak for him. But I am. We call ourselves citizens of Solvang, and we love living here. And so, I thank you for everything that you all do to make this a great place to live. And I just want to thank you for doing anything that will make our city a better place. My husband has asthma. I would just really love it. The more smoke-free we can be, where we don't have to face the cigarette smoke in our face and be forced to breathe it, the better. So I'm in favor of this, and thank you for considering it, and I think it's a great idea. Okay.
Thank you. I have no other speaker slips. Does anyone else wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council for discussion and action. Would you like to start, Joni?
So as I understand it, Brad, you're going to be bringing back the actual ordinance to us?
Yes, and if there's no changes, it'll look just like they have the one in the package.
Okay. I just want to make sure that all the cigarette butts get up off of the parking lots. Somehow.
So do we bring that up as another item, some
You know,
infrastructure type?
I can bring that back with the first reading, a budget adjustment to purchase, additional cigarette ashtrays, those types of things.
And would we be putting all of these in all of our parking lots?
I definitely would recommend putting them in the bus parking lot.
Definitely.
But yeah, we do have some trash cans, and we have some butt holders on some of our trash cans. So it's probably going to be more of those, adding those to our existing trash cans in certain locations.
Okay.
Any comments? No. Karen? Neil? I've had complaints of the butt cans being over full where they exist. Yeah. So we need to consider that as part of the thing.
More maintenance of the butt cans.
Okay. Since there's no other discussion, since there's no other discussion, I'll have a motion, or do we need one?
It's not on for action, so it
we
would
just-
be our opportunity to give direction if you wanted some
Any other
changes
direction
before it
does
came
anybody
back
want
to you.
to give? I guess that's it then. Item 7, council member reports. Do we have any council member reports? Seeing none?
Well, I'll just give one. Tomorrow, the Board of Supervisors is going to consider the possibility of hiring a consultant to make library people happier. That's tongue in cheek. That's tongue in cheek. No, but but they are going to have somebody come in and try to work with the various zones, zone 1, 2, 3, and 4 now. And we still do not have a permanent home, but hopefully we will understand shortly where Solvang and Buellton and Santa Ynez and Los Olivos Library will be located in the scheme of things.
I'll whip through the advanced calendar. Next meeting, we're going to consider resolution for wastewater bonds, consider resolution for the number of medical marijuana dispensaries, first reading of the tobacco ordinance, Solvang Park shade structure. We'll have a proclamation for the World Polo Day courtesy of the Rotary. Maintenance agreement with the Mercantile State right-of-way landscaping, and PG&E credits from King County. So if you have any interest in those, please come to the meeting. With that, we're adjourned.